Hi everybody, this is Lou and I am recording a little video for you about how I do my black and whites for this month's black and white challenge, which Hope asked me to do. First thing you guys should know is that I am a Photoshop and Adobe Camera Raw user, not a Lightroom user. But I think you will find that the basic controls in Adobe Camera Raw are the same as the basic controls in Lightroom. And in Photoshop I'm going to be using the Google NIX presets and actions, and those are available for you guys in Lightroom as well, and that's a free download from Google. So let's jump straight in and we'll play around with one of my fire photos. So let's just open up one of those images. And the first thing I do is play around with these basic settings here, and I will adjust contrast up to about 10. I always take highlights down to 0, shadows up to 100. I leave whites alone initially, and then I take blacks down to about -4 and clarity up to about 18 or 20. And that's something that I do with every photograph that I turn to black and white initially. I actually save this as a preset in Adobe Camera Raw, so it's just a one-click thing for me normally, but obviously I'm not using that now for you guys. And then I click Open Image, and that will open it up into Photoshop for me. And once the image opens, she says, while we wait for it, there we go. Now the first thing I want to do in Photoshop is create a new layer, because obviously you don't want to work on your main background layer in Photoshop. So that's Command J to create a new layer. And then we're going to go straight into Google NIX. So in Photoshop that's Filter, and then you go down here to your NIX collection, and then we're going to use Silver Efex Pro. Now in this version of Photoshop has not been updated yet. In the updated version, Google NIX does not appear under the filter tab. You have to have it as a separate little window which appears down here somewhere. But in this version I have it still under the filter tab. So we go to Silver Efex Pro. That takes the image into there. Now when you first open the image in Silver Efex Pro, the preset library has lots of presets that you can play around with. And the nice thing about the Google NIX is that everything is completely customizable. So if you click on a preset and then you look over here on the right hand side, you can see that you can change everything. There's global adjustments, there's selective adjustments, you can add control points, where you can change individual settings, you can change color filters, do all kinds of crazy stuff there. You can change your film type. This is set on neutral, but there's all kinds of different film types that you can add there. And then there's finishing adjustments, which adds vignette and different edges and things like that. I have a custom one which I've set up for my fire photos, which is here, which you can see has brightness adjusted 0%, contrast at 21%, and structure at 33%. That's the only changes it makes. The other thing that it does is it adds a vignette here with a lens fall off of 2. For this first initial edit, I'm going to turn that vignette off, okay? But leave those other adjustments where they are. So contrast at 21, structure of 33%, and leave everything else where it is. And then I just hit OK, and that's going to apply that preset to my image as another separate layer in Photoshop. Quite how that applies it in Lightroom, obviously you can't see the layers, but presumably it is adding it as a separate layer there. So you can see that there, Silver Efex Pro, as a separate layer. Now what I need to do now in Photoshop, I need to take this back into Camera Raw. So what I'm going to do in Photoshop is add what I call a composite layer, and to do that you're going to hit Command, Option, Shift, and then E. And that basically is creating a composite layer of these layers underneath. So if I turn everything else off, you still have that layer there. Now I'm going to go back up here to Filter, and then Camera Raw Filter, and that's going to take it back to here, and you can see that those initial adjustments I made are now zeroed off. And we're going to make some more adjustments again. So we're going to increase contrast, this time not so much, only about 4 or 5. I'm going to take highlights back down to 0 again, and shadows back up to 100 again. Blacks, again, down to about -4, and clarity only up to about 10 maybe this time, not quite so much. But what I am going to do this time is, because when I take the picture back into Photoshop and back into Silver Efex Pro, we're then going to apply the vignette. And what will happen when I do that is it's going to make some of the whites look really dull. So what I do this time round is I actually increase the whites up. You can take them up as much as you want. You could take them down if you wanted to. This is where you can play around and do whatever you want. I mean, you could really blow them out if you wanted to. To me, that looks a little bit crazy, but you know, everybody can do what they want. Everybody has a different preference. I usually take mine around to about 70, high 60s, between 65 and 70, somewhere around there, to see where they look. And then just hit OK. Again, I have that saved as another preset, and that's taken it back into Photoshop as a separate layer there. Now I'm going to relabel that layer as ACR2 because that's Adobe Camera Raw 2, a separate layer, and you can see there before and after, and see what that's done there, how that's really brightened it up. And then we're going to go back into Google Nix Silver Efex Pro 2. And what I'm going to do this time is I'm not going to apply any global adjustments. We're just going to apply that vignette. So you can see here on the global adjustments, everything's set to 0 initially. And we're literally just going to apply a vignette. Now, lens fall off is what I tend to use. You can see there's lens fall off 1, 2, and 3. And then there's different, you could do a lighter frame, a white frame, a lighter one, black frame again. Lens frame 3 is the one that I tend to use. And again, you can adjust this afterwards by using masks and things like that once you get back into Photoshop. So I'm going to hit lens fall off 3. If you want to, you can do burnt edges. That one is quite useful as well. If I just turn this one off for a minute. There we go. And go to burnt edges. You can do all the edges 1, all the edges 2. You can see that's a lot more subtle. All edges soft. That feathers it in a lot more soft too. That one's quite useful as well. You can see that's quite a nice effect there. You can also change the strength of this. So, oops, I turned it off. Let's put it back on. There we go. And then you can play around with the strength of it. And you can see it's adjusting whichever side you want it to adjust. So if you wanted to just adjust one side, you could just adjust one side, or you could adjust them all if you wanted to. And really close that in. You can change the size of things. Oh, it's completely disappearing there. So that's the all edges, but I'm going to go with the lens fall off. As I say, a lens fall off 3. So we'll click that and then just hit OK. And that again is going to apply that vignette to the image. Now, one thing you can do at this point, if you decide that you want to take it off on some areas, you can apply a mask to this. And there's your mask. Now, if I invert the mask, it's going to take that effect off completely. And you could use a brush with white selected, and you could actually paint on that vignette where you wanted it to go. Or if I switch that back over to black and just take that off completely. And just invert that again. It's putting it all on, and then if you leave it your brush on black, you can actually remove the vignette if it's come crouched into areas where you don't want it to be. You know, maybe I want to make my firefighter seem a little bit lighter because there's 2 of those guys there, you know, and it might not look so much like there's 2. Maybe I want to make the smoke look a little bit lighter. Remove that vignette there. And that's basically it. That's all I do. One thing I would do before I finished off is I would do another composite layer. And again, so that would be Command, Option, Shift, and E to create that composite layer. And now basically any layers in between there, I can turn those off. And it won't make any difference. If I click this off, you can see our original. And then you can see our finished black and white. And that's basically all I do. That's a Louise black and white, and that's all there is to it. So there we go. Have fun, play around. The Google Nix add-ons and presets are great fun because you can customize those as much as you want, and then you can save those presets. If I just go back into there, I'll show you how you do that quickly. So if we go back into Silver Efex Pro, you go to the preset library, you can find one that you like. Here we go, it's a much lighter one. And then you can play around with this. Might want to do something really kind of stark, really kind of way out there and funky. And then what you can do, where you have custom down here on the left hand side, if you click that plus button, it's going to ask you for a custom preset name. If I call that like high contrast, capital letters are great, high contrast, and hit OK, you can see then that it's added it to my custom. So if I just cancel and take that out and then go back in, filter, Silver Efex Pro, you go back in, I just hit high contrast, and there you go, it just does it for you. And that saves you a whole lot of time. So there we go. That is basically how I do my black and whites. I like to play around with them. It's not the same thing for every photograph, but I do have that same basic setup that I do with taking the shadows down, the highlights up, those initial setups, presets, and the same thing when I take the image back into Camera Raw to adjust those settings again. As I say, I'm not quite sure how you would do that. The initial one in Lightroom is very clear and straightforward. How you would do that a second time round in Lightroom, I'm not 100% sure. You guys will have to figure that out for you Lightroom users. To me, it's a lot easier to do that in Photoshop. But I've been using Photoshop for a lot longer than Lightroom has been around. So, and it's super easy. Google Nix makes it really, really easy. When I started off, I was doing this with a lot more layers. But there we go. So, you know, just play around with it, have some fun, and have a great time. Enjoy this month's challenge. And thank you for watching my little video.